D. Mace Fingan and Donick 1025, The Game. Broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. Willie Donick, Adam Vingan, and David Janes here with you. So, still DVD. It's Donick, Vingan, and David today. Derek Mason out, taking a long Labor Day weekend. So, with Willie still remote and Derek out, I'm in this big old studio all by myself. David's on the other side, of course, but I'm in this room all by myself. It's a little lonely. But Willie, I'm glad you're here.
Well, I'm glad to be here. This is my fifth location in 5 days this week. It's been a little bit of an odyssey, but we are locked in and ready to go on this Friday.
Absolutely. We hope that you are having a wonderful start to your Labor Day weekend. Some of you are almost there. We will take you right up to 6 o'clock when Connor Newt and Parker Curley bring you Game Blitz, high school football all around the region. But we start today with the fallout of the blockbuster trade made yesterday in the NFL. It broke during the 4 o'clock hour of our program. A blockbuster by its true definition. I said this yesterday. The term blockbuster trade is overused in sports, but Micah Parsons being traded from the Dallas Cowboys to the Green Bay Packers absolutely is a blockbuster trade. Now, Willie, we've talked about freezing cold takes on this program. Yesterday, Michael Irvin might have set the world record for coldest take in terms of the amount of time from when the take left his lips to the time it was ice cold. This was Michael Irvin on NFL Live yesterday talking about the potential of Micah Parsons being traded before he was actually traded.
Our Adam Schefter reporting that the Cowboys are now listening to trade offers for Micah Parsons. What's your reaction to that?
Micah Parsons, hey, look, you can report all you want. There's no way they're allowing Michael Parsons to go anywhere. All of it, all of this is part of the negotiations. And as I talked to Jerry the other day on my podcast, and he was talking about it the other day when he tried to make that offer, he said somebody told him to shove it up his rear and all of that. I honestly, it blew my mind. It blew my mind that any kind of conversation like that would be going on in a situation like this. Michael Parsons, I want him to take control of this thing and say, I don't care about you two and whatever y'all got going. Get your butts in a room and get my money on that paper. That's what you need to be doing. So I'm hoping that's what gets done. But I guarantee Michael Parsons not going anywhere. Jerry's not that crazy. This is all what we call just negotiation stuff.
Our Adam.
So the NFL on ESPN X account, Willie, posted that clip at 3:59 p.m. 1 minute later, the news broke that Parsons had been traded to the Packers.
And, you know, I would have felt pretty confident, too, if I were Michael Irvin, because he had the one-on-one with Jerry Jones. You would think he had access that not many people had, and yet he was dead wrong. So I would have been dead wrong, I think, in the same situation. But it happens to everybody, and it happened to Michael Irvin. So I'm still shocked that went down the way it did. One thing I want to say up front, though, Adam, and I don't know when this actually came out. I don't know if I just overlooked it while we were on the air yesterday, because you stopped you literally stopped mid-sentence when this went down, and we were on the air. I didn't realize it was 2 first-round picks. Plus, they did get the Cowboys did get a pretty good player that they can immediately use in Kenny Clark, and he's no slouch. You know, he's a 3-time Pro Bowler, completely different type of player on the defensive line than Micah Parsons. But one of my main points yesterday was that the Cowboys had to take a big step back this year. They don't see the fruits of this until down the road, but they at least do get a serviceable, if not a really good, defensive tackle. So they got a little more return than I realized, but still, who gives up the best player? It's not even close. And the Green Bay Packer cheeseheads are celebrating nationwide.
So Jerry Jones held a news conference yesterday, of course. And when I caught wind of it, I went right to the Cowboys live stream because I had to hear it for myself. At one point, Jerry Jones answered a question with an 11-minute monologue. It was incredibly impressive. But the one thing that Jerry Jones kept doing, and I don't know if it was intentional, was he kept referring to Micah Parsons as Michael Parsons. He did it multiple times during the news conference. Listen to, at one point, his son, Stephen Jones, who was sitting next to him. Listen to Stephen Jones interject when his father continues to call Micah Parsons Michael Parsons.
Would like to try to figure this out.
Did I talk to Michael
Micah.
about, I'm sorry, I didn't get the,
Can we play that again, David? Just listen to the disdain.
did I talk to Michael
Micah.
about, I'm sorry, I didn't get the,
He was having a senior moment. Stephen Jones's dad was having a senior moment, but just the look on his face. Micah, we've all been there with a relative, right? An older relative that keeps mispronouncing somebody's name or what have you. But I got a huge laugh out of that.
And especially one that you care about, and you're like, Dad, or you know, Uncle Jimmy. It's not Michael. He is 82, right? Jerry Jones is 82 years old.
Yes.
But you would think that you might, just because of the magnitude of this, you might have that locked in your brain, the correct name.
Right. But as an 82-year-old, he is prone to having senior moments, I'm sure. But what is fascinating about Jerry Jones, and Jerry Jones has owned the Cowboys now for, I believe, my entire lifetime. He bought the Cowboys in 1989 when I was born. Are there any general managers? Because keep in mind, not only does Jerry Jones own the Dallas Cowboys, he functions as the team's general manager. Are there any other general managers who would survive a 30-year run without a single championship game appearance, let alone botching several contract negotiations with star players? Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, now Micah Parsons. It's a unique position in sports, Willie, that Jerry Jones inhabits.
It does. And I think if you're being honest, the rest of the league probably likes that he's the general manager. In other words, let's say the other 31 general managers could sit there and say, okay, your choice is that Jerry Jones continues to be the GM, or they hire another GM. It's like, it's the known versus the unknown. I think a big majority would say, yeah, keep Jerry. We want him right where he is. Would you agree?
Yes.
Because they probably feel like they can get the best of Jerry better than the X factor, which may be better, may be worse. So it's not like the Cowboys have been a bad team for 30 years. They've had a lot of pretty good teams, so they've just never been able to put it all together. And it seems to be the same mistake every time. Ironically, this is a different outcome than has happened most times with Jerry Jones. He's had a lot of drama with high-end players, and he usually pays them big. He usually can't keep his mind off of signing the big name, and it's usually the depth and the roster management, the details, the margins is where they fall short. At least that's how I view it from where I sit.
One thing I do like about this trade, Willie, and I want your opinion on this. The word parity is used a lot by commissioners in professional sports. Gary Bettman says it a lot. Adam Silver says it a lot. Roger Goodell probably says it a lot. I'm sure Rob Manfred probably says it a lot. And most times, I think that it's just lip service when we're talking about parity in professional sports. But I do think that this trade could sort of be a blessing for the NFL, because the league can now point to the smallest market in the league that does not have a billionaire owner. Remember, this is a community-owned team, the Green Bay Packers. A community-owned team in the league's smallest market can step up and get a player of Micah Parsons' caliber and pay for him. So Roger Goodell can say, hey, Green Bay, little Green Bay, Wisconsin, can compete with the New Yorks and the LAs and the Dallases of the world. So I do think that speaks well for competitive balance and Roger Goodell being able to trumpet that whenever he does news conferences and such.
I think it is one of the most appealing things in my mind about the NFL and the NHL is it is really truly competitively balanced, regardless of market size. There are some advantages that the bigger markets will always have, but everybody in the league feels like they can win the Super Bowl. And I'm thankful that in our market, in Nashville, that those are the two sports and salary caps that we have, because otherwise, as much as the city has grown that we live in, Adam, even since you became a Nashvilleian, we would still be relatively a smaller market if the Major League Baseball had come to Nashville or the NBA had gone to Nashville Arena way back when instead of the NHL. I think there would be a lot of hardship to try to compete. It's not like they couldn't do it. They've taken some measures in the NBA. The NBA does have a salary cap, and Major League Baseball does have some revenue sharing now, but it's a lot harder for the small market teams to make it work. You got less margin for error there. So I agree with you 100%. If there was any doubt, I don't even know if it ever gets talked about, right? But this is a great example of competitive balance in the NFL.
You sent me an interesting X thread today from Don Van Natta Jr., who, coincidentally, is writing an unauthorized biography about Jerry Jones. Explain to our listeners what this thread from Don Van Natta said, because I did find it interesting.
Yeah, it was a different perspective, and it was something that I think probably might tell you a little bit of what happened here. And because we just got done saying Jerry Jones, if you go back through the years, I go back to the very beginning of the salary cap and the very new principle of the franchise player, right? The first big franchise player story I can ever remember was Emmitt Smith, back when they won the Super Bowl for the first of 2 in a row and 3 out of 4. That was the heyday of the Cowboys. I'm sure I haven't watched the Netflix series yet. I probably will get around to it at some point because there was nothing but drama with those Cowboys teams. But if you remember, Emmitt Smith held out the year after they won the Super Bowl, and they went 0-2 to start the year. And then all of a sudden, Jerry Jones buckled and signed Emmitt Smith. And since then, the star players, he's really never let any of them leave that I can remember. Maybe somebody who's a real big-time Cowboys fan can correct me on this. But by and large, he keeps the superstars in there. And their rosters have been more often than not top-heavy. So this is a change of pace. But this was good insight by Don Van Natta. He said, Jerry Jones bought the Cowboys by shaking hands with Bum Bright. Micah Parsons committed to a contract extension with Jerry on a handshake. And Jerry did say that, right, in both of the interviews, the one he did with Michael Irvin and the other one he did with Stephen A. Smith. When Parsons reneged on the handshake deal, Jerry decided Parsons would never again wear the star on his helmet. If Jerry can't trust you, you're done. I've had conversations with Jerry about that handshake deal with Bum Bright and the sanctity of it. It took weeks to draw up the paperwork for the team sale 2 months before owners approved Jerry as the new owner. But Bright trusted Jerry, and Jerry trusted Bright, for better or worse. So that is sort of maybe the backdrop of maybe the old school mentality of Jerry Jones. But I didn't get the sense during those interviews, right, on the podcast, Adam, that Jerry Jones was done with Micah Parsons, right? And at that point, he had already been told to go stick it by Micah Parsons' agent. So I don't know how it went down, but I did think that was a very different insight that I hadn't heard anywhere else.
I understand that handshake agreement to buy the Dallas Cowboys is a huge part of Cowboys lore. And who am I to offer Jerry Jones business advice? Because Jerry Jones has forgotten more about business than I will ever know. But it feels like a handshake agreement shouldn't be enough in this day and age for someone to feel confident that something's going to happen. And I am waiting for the now they tell us story. This is a huge part of all journalism, but specifically sports journalism in this case. You saw it when Luka Doncic was traded. Speaking of Dallas athletes who were traded shockingly, There will come a time in the next few days, maybe within the week or so, where somebody is going to write this gigantic story about everything that's happened or everything that did happen leading up to the trading of Micah Parsons. It's called the Now They Tell Us story. And I can't wait to read this story because there is going to be so much juice to it. But as you said yesterday, I stopped mid-sentence when David told me that Micah Parsons had been traded. And even a day later, I can't believe it. This truly was a blockbuster trade. It feels like it's going to be one of those trades, and perhaps this is premature, but it feels like it's going to be one of those trades that you remember where you were when it happened, especially if Micah Parsons goes on to have the type of season he's been having in Dallas, in Green Bay, and the Packers do incredibly well, especially if they win the Super Bowl this coming season. This is I was there when I heard Micah Parsons had been traded from the Cowboys to the Green Bay Packers. 615-737-1025. Our phone and text lines are driven by WilsonCountyHunting.com. Your thoughts now a day removed from the Cowboys trading Micah Parsons to the Green Bay Packers. 615-737-1025. Coming up next, a huge slate of top 10 versus top 10 college football games this weekend. Your multi-view is going to get a workout. There is a question that I want Willie and I to attempt to answer about the SEC. And this is a storyline that I believe is going to extend through the entire college football season. This is not the first time that this question has been asked about the SEC. And Willie and I will tackle it coming up next. 615-737-1025. Later today on ESPN 94.9 The Fan, the Nashville Sounds take on Charlotte at First Horizon Park with the first pitch at 6:35. Coverage is also available on the Game Nashville app and at theGameNashville.com. Sounds Baseball on ESPN 94.9 The Fan is presented by Twin Peaks and Family Leisure. Vanderbilt football begins the season this Saturday at home against Charleston Southern. Catch all the action on 102.5 The Game with the pregame show starting at 4:30. Kickoff is at 6. Coverage is also available on the Game Nashville app and at thegamenashville.com. Vanderbilt football is presented by Gary Force Acura and Smoky Mountaintops. Willie Donick and Adam Vingan here with you. By the way, a sellout for Vanderbilt in its home opener against Charleston Southern. Coach Willie, how are we feeling about Vanderbilt's season on the eve of week 1?
Well, that makes, first of all, that is a big thing to sell out the game in advance against Charleston Southern. They have put a ton of time, energy, resources into that stadium. The end zones are going to look very different. It's going to look like a more modern facility. It may not be the best in the country, but it has moved up a lot since for years it was neglected and fell way behind the standard of not only the SEC and the teams you're trying to play in your league, but also just general Division I college football, major college division football. They were way behind for the stadium. So this is going to be really exciting. And I think it's going to be a place that attracts people. And Charleston Southern is probably not going to bring a ton of fans like the other SEC teams are. So that shows you that they've got some people there that aren't coming every week. So now their job is to continue to play well enough and be a team people are talking about and want to come see play and recruit another wave of Nashvillians to sort of adopt Vanderbilt as their team. This city is growing, and there's a lot of people every year that move in there. You want them to saddle up to your team. So that's why I'm excited. I go back to the James Franklin 3-year run that he had. And James Franklin inherited a better team than Clark Lee. And honestly, it wasn't even close. James Franklin is given a lot of props, as he absolutely deserved. But one thing that was maybe overlooked was that Bobby Johnson left him the framework of a good enough team to where James Franklin could jump in and have immediate success. Clark Lee took over after COVID, and it was on the bottom. He inherited an 0-10 team that had nobody to start with. So it's taken Clark Lee a little longer. But once James Franklin started winning, he backed up the hype the following year and then the year after that with 9 win seasons back to back after that initial success that he had. And so that's the challenge for Clark Lee. And he talks about it all the time. He talked about it on our show, is you can't be complacent. You have to keep that hungry chip on your shoulder. So Coach Willie is cautiously optimistic and excited to see what they've got for an encore.
Charleston Southern at Vanderbilt is one of many SEC games this weekend. Some gigantic games. Of course, the headliner, the main event, number 1 Texas at number 3 Ohio State. Tennessee opens the season on a neutral field in Atlanta against Syracuse. There's another all top 10 matchup, LSU at Clemson, number 9 at number 4. Alabama has an intriguing game on the road at Florida State. Virginia Tech out South Carolina. There are a lot of interesting games in the SEC in week 1. And there is a question that was posed by Jordan Ritter-Kahn of The Ringer. And Willie, this is not the first time this question has been the premise of a think piece. The headline, is the SEC's era of invincibility over? We discussed a similar story during SEC Media Days when the Wall Street Journal asked more or less the same question. But I am sure this is going to be a talking point throughout the college football season. The premise of Ritter-Kahn's article is, quote, is the SEC still the king of college football? For the first time in more than 20 years, there is doubt. What does that mean for the culture of the sport and for the fans who have clung to conference superiority so tightly? So let's start there, Willie. The premise of the article. Let me ask you that same question. Is the SEC still the king of college football? And there is doubt in that for the first time in more than 20 years. What does this mean for the culture of the sport and for the fans who have clung to conference superiority so tightly?
First of all, it's a really good piece because it's not just a brag piece or a emotional piece. it's got some data and some research behind the theory, which I always appreciate, and I think you do as well, Adam. It's not a bunch of hot air. As far as the culture, I don't think it's going to affect the culture one bit. You're going to have everybody, if it falls a little further, let's say the Big Ten or another league wins 4 out of 5 or 5 out of 7, and the SEC really, it's only going to make those programs and those schools and that league more determined to be the best. I still think they're the best. I will always be an SEC snob, having played a couple of sports in that league. So I'm always going to be biased. But there are a couple of really good points he makes, Adam, specifically. And we all can say in general, right? The money of the NIL, the transfer portal. But there's some pretty good data now that does suggest that the talent is being spread along a little different. It's harder for Nick Sabans, the Kirby Smarts, when Urban Meyer was at Florida, to hoard and deeply lock in the best players to where there was so much strength in numbers and depth. There was a big advantage there. Would you agree, Adam, that it is tougher to do that now because a really, really good player with the availability and the flexibility to leave is just not going to stay and be a backup or a third string guy at a program. He's going to find somewhere else to land.
Yes, and Jordan Ritter-Kahn in this article includes an interview that Kirby Smart did with Josh Pate, college football commentator. He writes, quote, Smart said that he watches film of each day of spring practice, then goes back to the 2 national championship teams at Georgia, 2021 and 2022, and watches film of those same days of practice in each of those years. The difference he sees is undeniable. Quote, there's not as much depth, Smart said to the team now. There's much more younger players. There's not as much attention to detail. Then Jordan Ritter-Kahn writes, this is the reality of this era. Rosters like the one that sent 5 defenders to the NFL draft's first round and 15 players to the draft in total, like Georgia's did in 2022, are a lot more difficult to maintain. So when Smart looks at his current team, should he compare his team to previous versions or should he compare it to the competition on the field? Quote, I have to accept that it's different now, Smart said. I thought that was perhaps the most fascinating part of the article.
Well, let's look at a specific example at the position that we know the easiest to relate to, and that's the quarterback. There was a game a couple years ago for the national championship, right? And it involved Georgia and Alabama. Alabama had Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts had a bad first half. They went to their backup in a very important game, in a game where everything was on the line. And they had a guy named Tua Tagovailoa who was the backup, right? He goes in there, lights it up, and they end up beating Georgia in an unbelievable final, right? That was pre-NIL. Now let's fast forward to last year. Georgia has a really good quarterback in Carson Beck, albeit a guy that wasn't having a great year, but he's still a really big talent, right? He was a guy that, for college quarterbacks, he was high end, and he got them into the playoffs. He gets hurt in the SEC championship game, and their backup is not Tua or anybody close to that. It's a guy named Gunnar Stockton, who may well be a really good quarterback this year with a year under his belt. But he was clearly a huge drop-off, and that's just one reason of several that this article lays out well as to why it's harder for one league to dominate, right? They had to go to Stockton. So they didn't have the 5-star, guy waiting in the wings to go in there and not drop off a lick.
Jordan Ritter-Kahn writes, for 2 whole years in a row, a school from outside the SEC has won the college football playoff national title. And for 2 whole years in a row, the SEC has not even sent a team to the national title game. This is not supposed to happen. Since 1998, the first year of the bowl championship series that preceded the 2014 introduction of the playoff era, 6 different SEC schools have won outright national titles. Between 1969 and 2012, the Big Ten as a conference won an outright title only once. Between 2006 and 2023, the SEC won 13 of 17 national titles. And when you hear that last part, that between 2006 and 2023, that the SEC won 13 of 17 national titles. I am sure there are people listening that think that a premise of this article is completely overblown. But think about it for a minute. And this is when I think there might be some panic, Willie, for lack of a better word. If the SEC fails to get another for a third year in a row, either fails to win the national title or even fails to get a team into the national title game, I believe this will be the first time in roughly 25 years that the SEC went 3 consecutive years without winning a national championship in football. I think that if the SEC gets shut out this season, I think that's when perhaps more people will agree with the idea that this article presents.
Yeah, but it's not a panic, and it's not going to change the culture, right? It's going to become more of a story. So I'm not as worried about what happened the last 2 years, but the article laid out some things to me that I also gave a lot of thought to. It was thought provoking, so this is good. I got to give this guy a lot of credit because at first I was like, okay, another article about hey the SEC, we're coming for you SEC, but there's actually some really good substance in here, and the other part he mentions. Let's go back to Georgia last year, is what I've been talking about a lot, is the fear I would have if I'm Greg Sankey, and it's their own fault, because I was squawking on this show years ago. Don't go to 14 teams. Don't go to 16 teams. You don't have to do it. They did it for money, and now you've got a super conference that is so deep, you are going to see a lot of attrition. They're going to beat each other up. They are superpowers. But by the time they get to that playoff, and oh, by the way, in a couple of years, you're going to have to win 4 games to win the title after slugging the heck out of it for 12 regular season games, plus perhaps an SEC title game. That's a lot of football. And we just got done saying how tough it is to compile the type of depth that some of these super teams used to have. LSU, Alabama, Georgia, when they were on their runs, Tennessee way back, Florida way back during their powerhouse, they had unbelievable depth. They could withstand some big injuries, and they were having to win less games to win the whole thing. So think about when Major League Baseball went from just the league champion and goes straight to the World Series like it was until 1969, right? All you had to do was win 1 World Series. Then all of a sudden you had to win a championship series. Then you had to win 3 rounds of playoffs. So a team like the Braves that was the best team for a long period of time got knocked off a bunch because they had to win 3 playoff series to win the whole thing. Now in Major League Baseball, you've got another tier that you've got to win. The wild card teams have to win 4 rounds. So it just leaves yourself some randomness like last year. We just saw it. Notre Dame, they got the benefit of playing Georgia without their quarterback. Would Georgia have beaten Notre Dame if they had Carson Beck? I don't know, but they would have been in much better position to do it. But the attrition got to Georgia, and the attrition got to them over the course of the season in the SEC championship game. So you see what I'm saying? It's a longer road. It's a tougher road. There's more randomness because you've got to win more games, and that opens things up for more teams to win it.
615-737-1025. Our phone and text lines are driven by Wilson County Hyundai.com. Jordan Ritter-Kahn of The Ringer asks the question, is the SEC's era of invincibility over? You let us know. 615-737-1025. We will continue the conversation next and get to your reaction. This season, catch MTSU football on Totally Hits 93.3. Tomorrow, the Blue Raiders will host Austin Peay. Kickoff is at 6. Coverage is also available on the Totally Hits Nashville app and at totallyhitsnashville.com. Tune into ESPN 94.9 The Fan this Sunday at 2 o'clock for our college football game of the week, Virginia Tech versus South Carolina, presented by Twin Peaks Restaurants and Circus Sportsbook Kentucky. Coverage is also available on the Game Nashville app and at thegamenashville.com. Willie Donick and Adam Vingan here with you. Derek Mason out today. He will be back on Tuesday. Talking an interesting article written by Jordan Ritter-Kahn of The Ringer with the headline, "The SEC's era of invincibility is over." Here is a part of Ritter-Kahn's article. Quote, "For nearly a quarter century, the Southeastern Conference has been the most dominant force in college football, functioning as a multi-pronged behemoth, swallowing whole any foe from another region of the country who dared to believe it could compete. And yet, after all that time and all those championships and all those boastful SEC chants that rang out from Lexington to Fayetteville and beyond, there is now a creeping fear that God's chosen conference is merely very, very, very good." So, Willie, we touched on the major reasons why this is happening. You mentioned the transfer portal. You mentioned NIL. Another aspect is the format of the college football playoff now, how college football determines a champion. And here was a section of the article that I want to highlight. Ritter-Kahn notes that all three of the SEC's playoff teams, Texas, Georgia, and Tennessee, were eliminated by programs that wouldn't have even qualified for a 4-team bracket had it still been in place. So the consensus around the sport, Willie, was that a larger playoff field would only strengthen the SEC's position because they are the dominant conference, at least it has been for a long time. But in year one of the expanded playoff, at least, it actually made the league more vulnerable.
Yeah, I think I buy that theory, and I buy that theory is going to be true going forward, even with the newly found the new info or data that Greg Sankey was banking on, in that they are going to look at strength of schedule, strength of record more so than before, where it's still sort of in the DNA of a committee to say, well, that team's 12-1. We got to go with the 12-1 team. I think we're gonna the first time it happens where a 12-1 team is overlooked by a 9-3 team or overtaken by a 9-3 team. That's when we're really going to know that this is for real, this mindset. And maybe that will help the SEC get another team into the field. So there'll be some years that a hot SEC team becomes the champion that wouldn't have been in the field otherwise in the old system. So that could work in their favor too. But I do think that it wasn't discussed as much in the article as I thought it might be, with the attrition factor. It just means so much more to more of the 16 teams than it does in the Big Ten, who has 18 teams. And you've got some programs in there in the bottom 5 that still will have to prove that they can be in the mix for a 4 or 5 year run of relative success. Otherwise, it's still going to be a little easier of a path for the superpowers in the Big Ten to get through the minefield of getting to the tournament and then being able to make noise in the tournament. So I think it sets up well for an Ohio State, an Oregon, a Michigan. I think they've got an easier road than any of the powerhouses in the SEC.
Jeff on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, says, "Willie just said what the difference is now. You'll have to win 4 games to win the title, because now the champion is being determined more on the field instead of by a computer, and now the committee choices aren't as impactful since all who have a legit chance are in."
I think it's a good point. And I think the SEC has probably benefited more than anybody else of, and I can't remember the year. I can't swear to it. But there was a year, I want to say maybe 2011 or 2012, where Oklahoma State had a really good team, but Alabama got the vote. I think sometimes the pedigree and the tradition clouds the judgment when it was just, hey, who should go, Team A or Team B? If Team A was a traditional power like an SEC team, like a Bama or an LSU, as opposed to an upstart like TCU or Kansas State or Oklahoma State, I think there were probably some years where the SEC team got the nod. And now it's going to be a more open field, right? The more teams are going to get in. And if you're really that good, you're going to win. But let's keep in mind, before we panic, and this guy does a good job of drumming up the drama, right? And the panic and the, oh my gosh, what will the sky fall if this happens? But always keep in mind that the phrase "it just means more" is true, and it's really not healthy, but it does mean more in the SEC. It's maniacal, and that will always drive that league to want to continue to be the best. They're going to put more resources in it than any other league collectively. And I include the Big Ten in that, even though the Big Ten has plenty of resources. There are just more programs that it means everything to at the expense of a lot of things. And again, that's not always a good thing, but it does mean that they will be relentless in their pursuit to be the best. That means something.
Jordan Ritter-Kahn writes, quote, Texas enters the season ranked number 1 in both the AP and coaches polls, but lacks any history of winning at the highest levels under head coach Steve Sarkisian. Georgia remains loaded with talent, but has question marks at quarterback and is coming off the program's least successful season this decade. Alabama's roster is tied with Ohio State's in having the highest blue chip ratio in the country, but has all of the same unknowns as the Longhorns and Bulldogs. LSU brings back projected top NFL draft pick Garrett Nussmeier and welcomes a loaded transfer class, but the next big game that Brian Kelly wins in Baton Rouge will be the first, and Brian Kelly will have an opportunity this weekend at Clemson. Meanwhile, Ohio State has reloaded, Clemson has resurged, and Penn State returns more talent than any team in the country. And just for context, I'm looking at the national championship winner odds on ESPN Bet. Ohio State and Texas are the favorites at plus 550, Penn State at plus 650, Georgia at plus 800, Alabama and Clemson at plus 900, followed by Notre Dame plus 1100, LSU at plus 1500.
My focus is not for this article. My focus is not more about this year. It's much more about the next 5 to 10 years as the NIL and transfer portal, this new system shakes out. And I realize this isn't the first year of the system, but we're still in the phase where teams are figuring out where they are in the universe now. And Vanderbilt's a good example. Vanderbilt was way behind a couple years ago, and they had a choice of, are we going to get into this game, or are we just going to, do we need to just bow out and say, we don't want it, we don't want to be a part of this? And they decided to get in the game, and they've had success because they've started to figure out, and it remains to be seen whether they can do this every year. They've started to figure out how they find the right amount of players to be somewhat successful in this Super League. I think as we go forward, teams are going to figure out how to utilize their resources in the most smart way, if that makes sense. And like I said, I'm banking on the fact that it means so much to the SEC teams. I don't think they're going to go about it dumb, right? At least not enough of it. I think Ohio State, in the meantime, has got all their ducks in a row. With Michigan especially, still they are going to pay a price for the signal stealing thing. And so it gives Ohio State, who has the utmost resources and a relatively easier path, it gives them a leg up right now. But for everybody else, like Clemson's an intriguing one. If Florida State could ever get everything together like they can when they're at their best, they would be intriguing. Because I don't know if Clemson's as good still as they were a few years ago. But, I still think every year the SEC is going to have about 6 teams that could say if it goes right, they could win. They have the resources to win. It's still a little murkier in some of the other leagues. Like the Big 12 would be an example.
Matthew from Jolton says, disclaimer, I am a Michigan fan. The SEC has definitely taken a step back since paying players has become legal and everyone can do it instead of the SEC doing it under the table. Justin from Greenbrier says the SEC is going to be brought closer to the other conferences by parity due to NIL and the fact that they will beat each other up and knock each other out. Both texters make good points. It's what you were saying earlier, Willie, that in the pre-NIL transfer portal days, as we know them now, SEC teams had 5-star recruits, third on the depth chart at their position. That doesn't happen anymore because those players aren't going to waste away on the bench waiting for their opportunity. They are going to chase the money. They're going to enter the portal and get an opportunity to play right away. So that those days are over, which I think is spreading out the talent around the country, which is putting the SEC's dominance in jeopardy.
No doubt. There's so many examples through the years of teams who lost a great player, but had an NFL guy ready to go to back him up. Tennessee, when they, if I think I've got my years straight, we'll check with Chad when he comes on with us. But in '98, I think that was the year that Jamal Lewis tore up his knee in the middle of the season, and they had Travis Henry right behind him. They didn't skip a beat. They were fine. They had another guy who was a great running back, ready to go. It's a little harder to have that caliber of a backup that percentage of the time now because a guy's not going to sit there and be a backup when it's a little easier to gauge now, more education of where you can go, who's going to pay you, and where the opportunity is to be a starter. So that is going to create some parity.
615-737-1025. Our phone and text lines are driven by Wilson County Hyundai.com. You can continue to answer this question as posed by Jordan Ritter Kahn of The Ringer, who wrote a story I recommend at that website. Is the SEC's era of invincibility over? Let us know. 615-737-1025. But coming up next, speaking of the SEC, there is a gigantic game this weekend. We've already touched on it. Texas versus Ohio State. And there is one player in particular that everybody is waiting to see. Is there any way that this player can live up to the immense hype that has been thrust upon him this college football season? Willie and I will discuss that coming up next. 615-737-1025. Tune in for the Borchetta Bourbon Music City Grand Prix race on 1025 The Game this Sunday. Coverage begins at 1 p.m. and is brought to you by Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. D. Maceman, Ginandonic 1025, The Game, broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. Willie Donick, Adam Vingan, and David Janes here with you. Derek Mason out today. He will be back on Tuesday. Commissioner Donick, we do have a request, a silly underdog picks related request on my personal text line from one Chris Sanders. He texted me during the break mentioning that the line has changed on Ohio State and Texas. He says Texas is favored, so can I go with Ohio State? I am looking on the line, at least on ESPN Bet. It still says Ohio State -1.5. I'll leave it up to you because I know the line has been moving a lot for this game tomorrow at 11 o'clock. But Chris is asking to change his pick because apparently Texas is now favored.
Look, you know that I'm a big fan of Chris Sanders. I am a big fan. But he knows the rules. He's been doing this. This is not his first year in the contest. He is a defending champion. You cannot change your pick after you make your pick. And if Texas was, whether the line changes or not, it's in the moment when you make the pick is the line that we go with, right? That's happened before in sports, right? You find out something about a game a day or two later, and the line changes a lot. You only know what you know at the time. So Texas will be his pick.
I just texted
We'll have
Chris.
to live with it. He's clearly had some tough nights the last couple of nights. The guilt is getting to him. He picking against his alma mater, and his being a little bit off track when he came on. It's getting to him. But I hope, Chris, if you're listening, this will only motivate you and drive you to be ready to go next week for week 2.
I texted Chris. Willie rules against it.
Chris is going to think I'm a bad guy, but I'm trying to make you better, Chris Sanders.
I'm thinking about the
expect the
precedent.
best
If you
from the defending champion.
imagine if you just said, yeah, he can do that. Like everything would go madness. It'd be not silly. It'd be madness underdogs.
We have to maintain the
It'd
integrity.
be the Wild West.
We have to
Exactly.
maintain the integrity of silly underdog picks. It's lasted 31 years for a reason, Chris Sanders. You will not ruin this for the rest of us. So, Chris, you've made your bed. Now you have to lie in it, my friend. So the pick, it stays. One texter on our previous conversation about whether the SEC's era of dominance in football is perhaps in jeopardy says this might have already been mentioned, but I believe the whole NIL and transfer portal was initiated by the networks and other leagues to help dismantle the SEC power because nothing else is working, as demonstrated by the winning percentages you mentioned on the show. The networks want more viewers so they can make more money, and nobody on a nationwide scale is going to watch an SEC team against another SEC team year after year.
I don't believe in the conspiracy theory. I think the SEC is probably its own worst enemy some by getting lured into picking teams that they didn't need. I could live with the 14. I didn't like it, but there was no reason they needed to get Oklahoma and Texas, really. You don't think they were making money, but you think they needed Oklahoma and Texas to sustain the greatness of the SEC? No. Oklahoma and Texas should not be in the SEC. I'm sorry. I don't like that they're there. They should be in the Big 12. And I realize the college football world has changed, and this is the world we live in, and I'll go with it. But Texas and Oklahoma should not be in the league. And the more team you have, you cannot have a 16-team football league when you only play 9 conference games. It doesn't work. It's not. You can't ever have an equal schedule. It's messed up. But who's to blame for that? It's not the TV thing. It's the league themselves. They didn't have to do that. They just wanted more money. It did nothing. Nothing was enough, so they had to go for more.
I mean, that's how I feel about Stanford and California being in the Atlantic Coast Conference, not to mention SMU, which is, of course, in Texas, and is nowhere near the Atlantic Coast. So I understand your point of view, Willie. But nevertheless, speaking of Chris Sanders trying to weasel his way out of his pick, The game he did choose, Texas at Ohio State, is a huge game. Tomorrow morning, 11 o'clock on Fox at Ohio Stadium. Number 1 Texas at number 3 Ohio State. And of course, the major storyline, it's not Texas versus Ohio State. It's Arch Manning versus the nearly unprecedented hype that surrounds him. Listen to some of these numbers, Willie, from ESPN. Arch Manning has thrown for 969 career yards. He started 2 games, but he enters the year as the Heisman favorite. His odds on ESPN Bet are listed at 650, solidly ahead of Clemson's Cade Klubnik and LSU's Garrett Nussmeier, and their combined 12,952 career yards. ESPN writes, as far as favorites go, Manning's resume is almost as light as anything we've seen. Only Alabama's Tua Tagovailoa, who began 2018 as the favorite after throwing for the national title-winning touchdown the season before, entered with fewer career yards, 636. So one question we are going to be asking ourselves all season long, is there any way that Arch Manning can live up to the hype that has been thrust upon him this season?
It'll be hard. And I would say that what I admire about how he's handled himself and how I think the family has done a good job of giving him the right perspective and is as good as you can do with giving him the tools to block out this very thing. Because I think sometimes you can melt under those types of expectations. That being said, if he doesn't live up to expectations, I don't think it's going to be because the pressure got to him. I think it just will be maybe he's not quite as good as he was built up to be. And I'm curious to see it, but I do think he's going to do really, really well. But there are some X factors here. I think there'll be some people that just aren't satisfied unless they win it. And it's been a long time since Texas has won. And they've been knocking on the door. They've been close. They're getting better. Like they should be a superpower, and they're getting there. They're close, and he might be just that good to put him over the top. But will he ever live up to the hype? No, I think that bar is set so high. We were hearing about him so early, 10th, 11th grade.
I also just learned that Matt Patricia is the defensive coordinator of Ohio State. I had no idea. Did you know that?
Well, Ohio State, I did not know that, but I knew that they, Chip Kelly, he left, right? There, that's another thing Ohio State's got to deal with. He's not there anymore. Ohio State, that's another one where it's a similar thing, right? It's a collective. It's not one player like Arch Manning, but it's hard to live up to the hype for Ohio State. So these are programs. The thing about it is that the loser of this game will not be, their fan base anyway, will not be in a total panic. They'll be all over it, but they're not going to freak out because there is still a pathway back to a national title, and you got to give each program credit for deciding to play these games.
Chris Sanders has chimed back in. He just wants clarification from the commissioner. If Texas wins, he still gets the points. Yes?
Yes. Texas is his pick.
Okay.
He would get a point and a half.
Okay.
Yeah, he's not disqualified or he's not forfeiting his pick or anything. You just have to take the pick that you make at the time.
Yes. But there is the weight of generations of Mannings on Arch's shoulders. We know the family history. Grandfather Archie, College Football Hall of Famer, Ole Miss legend. Peyton and Eli, Uncle Peyton, Uncle Eli, 4 Super Bowl rings between them. All 3 were selected for multiple Pro Bowls. Peyton Manning, of course, a member of the Pro Football Hall of Fame. But here is one thing that Archie never did, Peyton never did, and Eli never did, Willie, win a college football national championship. So wouldn't it be something if Arch Manning indeed leads the Longhorns to a college football national championship? That is something that his uncles and his grandfather can't stake a claim to.
That is true. That is true. And we just got done talking about in the last segment that the road to a championship is harder. And so once upon a time, you just had to win one game. That's your playoff run, one game. Now, getting there was, you had to be perfect, right? You couldn't stumble. So you had to probably play some great football on the way, but you only had to win one postseason game. Then you had to win 2. Now you have to win 4. So you got to be really good for a stretch. And that's what was impressive, I think, about Ohio State, right? They played 4 great games. Will Howard. Is it Will Howard? No.
Yes, it is Will Howard.
Will Howard. He really played his best football when everything was riding on his team's success, right? And that was a great success story. I don't know if he's going to be a decent NFL quarterback. There are plenty of players like A.J. McCarron, great college quarterbacks on great teams, but we're not really great NFL quarterbacks. But Howard is always going to have that run. He's going to be a legend at Ohio State because he played 4 excellent games when it was all on the line.
I agree with you about the loser of this game. It's going to suck for the losing fan base because you don't want to lose a huge game to open the season when you have national title aspirations. But the team that loses this game is going to be okay. They are still going to be firmly in the mix for the college football playoff. The game that I am most intrigued by this weekend, and I said your multi-view is going to get a workout. I don't know if I'm in the minority here, Willie. I don't like multi-view. I can't do multi-view because I can't get invested in any one game. I like to pick a game and focus on that game, and I'll do the old school thing and flip between channels during the commercial breaks of the game that I am focused on. So a lot of you like to do the multi-view. I like to keep it simple. I like to pick one game and focus on it. And I know these games are spread out over the course of the day, but the game that is most intriguing to me this weekend is LSU at Clemson, the battle of Death Valleys. We know that Brian Kelly is over in season openers as coach of the LSU Tigers. So he decides to schedule a true road game at the other Death Valley against a resurgent Clemson team. I don't hold the same opinion about the loser of this game than I do Texas and Ohio State. I think specifically for LSU, because Clemson can lose this game. You tell me if you disagree. Clemson can lose this game. They are going to probably run away with the ACC. So they'll still be in the mix, even if they lose this game. If LSU loses, knowing how tough the SEC is, I think that could put LSU behind the figurative 8 ball. So I think a lot is riding on winning this game for LSU.
I think it will be a test of what we've been told the new criteria is, that the criteria has changed, that strength of schedule is going to be a bigger component than it has before. That really could work in LSU's favor. If what happens, if the hypothetical you laid out happens, Clemson wins the game and Clemson rolls in the ACC, then LSU should get a benefit there. That should be a loss that would be equal to if Texas were to lose at Ohio State. The game intrigues me because LSU, because of their history, their recent history of openers, right? This is a thing, right? They have not been able to win. They've been starting 0-1.
They haven't won since 2020 or since 2019.
Yeah, but now they have Nussmeier coming back, right? So that they've got to feel good that they've got the guy who's been through it now stepping in. That's maybe a little different. Like they had to replace Jaden Daniels, and Jaden Daniels was only there for 1 year, right? Am I wrong in that?
Jaden Daniels was there for 1 year. That sounds right.
No, he was there for 2 seasons.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Was he the starter? Was he
Totally
the opening
wrong.
day starter?
Yes, I believe so. Yes, for both Florida
So they
States.
lost it. So when he was a second year, the Florida State. Did they lose to Florida State 2 years in a row
Yes.
in the opener? Okay. So that second one, that was a heck of a game. That game could have gone either way, if I remember correctly, and they just couldn't stop. It wasn't because of Jaden Daniels.
The first one was the LSU was about to tie it. They were going to kick the field goal, and the field goal kicker missed it, I think, wide left, if I remember right.
LSU's been part of some pretty good drama in these opening games.
Yes, they
so
have.
I think you're right, Adam, that the that's a must watch for sure. Is that going up head to head same time as Texas and Ohio State?
Texas and Ohio State is an early game. That starts at 11
Right, that's the
a.m.
noon.
Central Time.
LSU versus Clemson is at 6:30.
Yes, 6:30 on ABC.
Okay. Oh yeah, it's going to be a heck of a day.
You may have to
for
flip
some college
between that
football.
game and Charleston Southern and Vanderbilt because that game starts at 6.
Well, I'll be watching that one for sure. For sure.
Yes, and of course, just a great battle of quarterbacks as well in that game. Garrett Nussmeier versus Kay Klubnik.
Yep.
LSU.
Two of the top 5, I think. The Athletic did a whole ranking. Remember that we were making fun of the Athletic.
Yes.
For the craziness of trying to rank all 135 Division I quarterbacks.
Thereabouts.
But Nussmeier and Klubnik were both in the top 5, weren't they?
I'd have to go back and look, but that sounds right.
Both way up there. That's going to be a heck of a matchup.
The other game that sort of intrigues me is Alabama at Florida State. And if I'm not mistaken, this is the college game day game. This is Lee Corso's final game, correct?
I believe so.
Yes. Of course, Fox Big Noon Kickoff has Ohio State and Texas, so ESPN goes elsewhere. Now, Willie, as a broadcaster, how do you feel about the retirement of Lee Corso? I heard Chase and Big Joe talking a lot about it. A lot of tears are going to be shed. Lee Corso, an institution of college football. I wasn't a wake up every Saturday morning and watch college game day kind of guy, but I always did make time for the end of the show with the picks and Lee Corso putting on the mascot head. But your general thoughts on Lee Corso hanging it up after an illustrious broadcasting career?
Well, you can't ignore that he holds a big chapter in the rise of ESPN and their coverage of college football. He's an institution for sure. And I think it's admirable that they kept a role for him after all of the hardships that he went through health-wise. And it just shows you how much they respected and loved him to do that, right? Because if he were a jerk, they just would have said, well, we can't keep you on there, because it was clear, for the last however many years he's been doing it, since he had the health issues that completely made it very, very difficult for him to be himself, right? They stuck with him. And so they had to really love and enjoy him as a person. It had to mean a lot to them for him to continue to keep the job, right? That's a high-end job. You got to do well. So that says a lot about Lee Corso, the person. So I think that's where the emotion comes in for me. You got to respect that.
So it looks like
I do want to correct.
Will also be at Ohio State and Texas.
I want to correct myself. Lee Corso's final game day show will also be in Columbus, Ohio. And I believe I read earlier that Fox is actually going to simulcast Lee Corso's final headgear selection. So that'll be interesting.
Yeah,
that's
the respect, right?
Yes. 615-737-1025. Our phone and text lines are driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Coming up next, we will continue the college football discussion with Chad Withrow from Hot Mike with Hutton and Withrow on Outkick. I also want to get Chad's thoughts on all of the contracts that have been handed out in Knoxville this week. We'll do that with Chad. Coming up next, 615-737-1025. Also, be listening after Chad Withrow, because I do have tickets to give away if I can find them. Let's see. Here they are. So after Chad's, you can win a pair of tickets to see Coheed and Cambria with Taking Back Sunday at the Ascend Amphitheater on Wednesday, September 3rd. So listen to the cue to call after Chad Withrow coming up next, and you can win a pair of tickets to see Coheed and Cambria with Taking Back Sunday at Ascend on Wednesday, September 3rd. Chad Withrow coming up next. Willie Donick, Adam Vingan, 102.5 The Game. D. Mace Fingan and Donick 1025, The Game. Willie Donick, Adam Vingan here with you. Pleased to be joined on our phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, by Chad Withrow from Hot Mic with Hutton and Withrow on Outkick. Chad, a couple of new contracts were handed out in Knoxville this week. Josh Heupel received a new contract through January 2030. Rick Barnes received a lifetime contract from Danny White. I want your thoughts on both of these new contracts for Heupel and Barnes.
So just on its face, guys, also good to be with you on this Friday. Just on its face, first off, I don't love anything that happens right before a season. I just think it kind of opens the door to something bad happening and then everyone reacting negatively to, oh, you just gave the guy a contract extension and now he's quit coaching, or now the teams are going to be bad. That's just me looking at what everyone's going to say if things go south for Tennessee football this year or Tennessee basketball. But when you actually look at the details of these contracts, I think that Josh Heupel got like a 1-year extension onto what he already had before, and there's really not much of an adjustment in pay until later in the contract. So I do think this is sort of the, hey, we're going to show everyone how much coach means to us, and also say, hey, if Oklahoma goes south this year and Brent Venables gets fired, he's not going to go home because he just signed a contract here, because that's what's going to be the talk in recruiting if Oklahoma starts slow this year, that they're going to go out and get Josh Heupel to come home and be their head coach. So now Tennessee and Danny White can say, no, we just upped the buyout and we extended the contract. The Rick Barnes thing, I mean, I think everyone knew he's going to be the coach at Tennessee until he doesn't want to be the coach at Tennessee. So this is definitely a symbolic move by White to just go ahead and put it in writing that as long as Rick Barnes wants to coach here, he can coach here, given all the success he's had. I've really got no problem with that. I don't really think it changes anything with either program, but I can understand the symbolic nature of the Rick Barnes deal.
Chad, earlier in the show, Willie and I were discussing an article written by Jordan Ritter-Kahn at TheRinger.com with the headline, "Is the SEC's era of invincibility over in college football?" And this is going to be a talking point, I think, throughout the season, especially if an SEC team fails to win the national title or make it to the national title game. So do you agree with the idea of the article that the SEC's era of invincibility in college football could be in jeopardy, and will it if an SEC team does not win the title this season?
No, I don't think it's going to go away if they don't win the title this year, Adam. But I do think that because the 12-team playoff, because of NIL, it's going to be harder for the SEC to dominate the way they have in the past. I also think that when you really look at these things, if we're just talking national championships, well, let's say, the SEC has a better history of more teams being in contention and more teams winning a national title. I mean, just going back to the BCS championship era, Tennessee's won a title, Auburn's won a title, LSU's won multiple titles. We know how Alabama dominated. Georgia's won a title. There's been a number of teams, not just Ohio State and Michigan, that have been able to capture a championship. So I really think that the Big Ten is a really good conference. And let's go ahead and just cut through it. All we're really talking about here is the SEC and the Big Ten when it comes to college football dominance. The difference with the SEC is the SEC is not great 1 through 16 consistently or anything like that. But especially now that you add Texas and Oklahoma to the mix, you've got probably 8 to 9 that could theoretically, as a program, capture a national title or has done so before. I still think the issue with the Big Ten, it's just so top heavy. And when you have 18 different teams, the schedules get so different from team to team that it's tougher for them to really take over. Now, can Ohio State or Michigan or Oregon, even right now, when you look at those programs, are they every bit as good as some of the best in the SEC? Yeah, I think head-to-head, absolutely. And we saw that the last couple of years of Michigan and Ohio State's national championships. But it's still going to be tough for me to say that anyone is as good as the SEC in football when you look at the overall conference. Now, invincibility, when you throw that word around, yeah, I think the invincibility of the SEC that we saw 5 to 10 years ago, that probably has gone away.
Chad Withrow from Hot Mic with Hutton and Withrow on Outkick is our guest on D. Mace Vingan and Donick. Chad, the game that I am most looking forward to sitting down and watching this weekend is not actually Texas and Ohio State. It's LSU and Clemson, because those two teams have a lot of intriguing aspects to them. Which of those two teams has more to prove this weekend and throughout the course of the season?
So it wasn't Duke and Elon, right? That wasn't your big game to watch last
No,
night?
it didn't grab me the same way as these games are going to grab me now.
Yeah, it's going to be a little bit different tomorrow night in Death Valley for sure. That game's awesome. If I'm ranking the games, I think Ohio State, Texas is one. But, I mean, consensus, it's got to be that one. Notre Dame, Miami right there also. But, I mean, the stakes for Brian Kelly to not lose a sixth consecutive opening game of the season. And I mentioned Duke there also. Keep in mind, Clemson has lost the last two season openers to both Georgia and Duke by a combined 61-10. So they've had some struggles in the last 2 years in big opening games. So, yeah, I think it's great. I believe Cade Klubnik is going to win the Heisman this year. I think he's got the third best odds, but I think that offense is stacked for Clemson. Their schedule is very favorable, and I think he's going to do really well. It's such a big game for him. It's such a big game for the ACC. I mean, that's a game the conference cannot afford to lose. You've got LSU at home for Clemson. You're a slight favorite in the game. If they can get that win, it automatically gives the conference a little bit more respectability. So, yeah, I think it's huge for a number of reasons, for Brian Kelly, for Cade Klubnik and Clemson, for the ACC. I'm like you. I'm very excited to watch that game.
Chad Withrow is with us from Hot Mike with Hutton and Withrow. So, Chad, give me your mindset of what should happen for Tennessee against Syracuse. It seems like this is a good opener for them to have. It's a neutral site. The fans can all get down there. They'll have a big advantage, but it's a good test. It's not a complete cream puff. Like Syracuse was really good last year, although they've lost some guys. So do you think 13 is about right, or you are a little bit worried with some of the new quarterback and everything that's going on there?
By the way, Willie, sorry I could not attend the event for Aaron on Saturday. I hear it was unbelievably nice and well attended, which was awesome. I was actually in Newport, Rhode Island, which definitely made me think of you guys. Being in the state of Rhode Island and being there gave me thoughts of the Donics. So and certainly the Red Sox, which Red Sox Yankees were all over the TVs, all over Rhode Island, which I know does not surprise you. It was a sight to see, with all the New Englanders watching those games. But no, look, here's my expectation for Tennessee and Syracuse. I have no idea what either team's going to have on offense. I really don't. Like, we know what Josh Heupel does well, and I think Tennessee's going to be able to run the ball on Syracuse, considering they were terrible against the run a year ago, and I don't think that defense has gotten a lot better. But, I mean, we're talking about two quarterbacks who were not with their teams for spring practice. Steve Angeli came over post-spring practice from Notre Dame. And then, of course, Joey Aguilar came over post-spring practice at UCLA. So there are so many unknowns in this game. I just keep falling back, Willie, on if I don't see Tennessee exert their will on the line of scrimmage, I'm going to be disappointed, right? Like, that's the baseline for me. Their defensive line should be really good, not quite as good as a year ago, but really good, really deep. 4-star guys. Their offensive line, while new, should be able to impose their will, especially as the game wears on, against that Syracuse defensive front. So I think that's what I'm watching more than anything. I don't know what the passing game is going to be. All new receivers, new quarterback. Same goes for Syracuse. But just in terms of expectation, I'm going to be disappointed if Tennessee doesn't run all over Syracuse tomorrow.
So do you think, I know there's got a lot of new offensive linemen. Do you think, because in this day and age, we know with the NIL, just because it's new doesn't mean it's not better, right? And I know they had a lot of experienced guys last year. So do you think it's at the standard that they're looking for?
They got a 5-star number 1 tackle in the country in David Sanders, starting at right tackle. They returned their left tackle in Lance Hurd, who was not very good a year ago. But he's a former 5-star guy who it didn't work for him at LSU, and he transfers over. And there's good reports about him improving and getting better for this season. And then the interior, they've got a Notre Dame transfer starting at center. They've got a recruited player who's a little bit younger starting at guard. And at the other guard, they got an Arizona transfer and Wendell Moy coming in, who started at Arizona a year ago. And then Syracuse, it's funny you bring that up. They were terrible on the offensive line a year ago running the football, but they've replaced everyone with transfers too. So, yeah, I mean, I think you could look at that and say, well, it's early. They haven't had time to gel. It's a big question mark. But you could also say, well, what was a weakness a year ago? They went out and addressed in the transfer portal, and maybe it's a lot better. And you could say that about both teams in this game.
Yeah, that is the wild card. Like, for example, Vanderbilt, nobody had any idea with 50-something new players they could do what they did against Virginia Tech. So you can fix things in the transfer portal, and they can also go horribly wrong in the transfer portal with all these new guys.
Basketball too, right? I mean, like the
100%.
two examples in this city. No one knew what Diego Pavia and Vandy's offense was going to look like. Certainly Virginia Tech didn't know, and they got smacked in the face of the 2x4 in that game. And by the time they could get their footing underneath them, it was a little bit too late. And Vanderbilt was able to hang on for a huge upset win in week 1. Vandy basketball a year ago, all new roster. No one had any idea they could be a good NCAA tournament team. So, yeah, I mean, I think if you're a Tennessee fan going into this game, you feel like you know Josh Heupel by now and you're pretty comfortable with what he's going to do. They're going to have a good rushing attack. Defensively, under Tim Banks, they've gotten better and better. They're going to be good on that side of the ball. But I think you'd be fooling yourself if you go into any of these games that are transfer-heavy teams in the NIL era and feel like you really know exactly what's going to happen in week 1. So I'd be ready for anything if I were a Tennessee fan tomorrow. But, again, I would be disappointed if Tennessee can't run the football against this Syracuse team from what I know about both of them.
All eyes are going to be on the Texas-Ohio State game, and all eyes will be on Arch Manning. So I'm not going to ask you, Chad, the question of living up to the hype. Here's what I want to know, and maybe anybody listening could have this. The Manning family reeks of SEC, reeks of playing the right way. They are so respected. But Texas, for most SEC fans, is not a well-loved team, right? They're new, and why are they here? And do we want them here? So do you think it will be hard for SEC fans and specifically Tennessee fans to root against a Manning? Or do you think deep down, like, hey, I kind of hope the kid does well?
That is a great question, and one that I've thought quite a lot about, to be honest. So here's what I think about Texas in terms of the SEC. You're absolutely right. The Manning family is SEC royalty. I still have a hard time thinking about Texas in the SEC. You know, they are the Lone Star State. They are the Republic, right? They're pretty much their own country. I mean, ask a Texan what they think about Texas, and you would think they were from France. You know, it's like a completely different culture and not a part of the contiguous 48 states. They're their own thing. So I can't, you know, all the SEC, and getting the chance going. It's still very weird for me to think about Texas carrying the banner for the SEC, but technically they're in the SEC. I mean, it's hard for me to think about USC and Oregon as a Big Ten school also. So, yeah, I think it is going to be hard for Tennessee fans to root for Arch Manning. I don't think there's outright vitriol like there's going to be for Nico and UCLA from a Tennessee fan base. But I do think it's kind of weird because I'm like you. When I think Manning's, I think SEC. You know, you think Ole Miss, you think Tennessee. Had Arch ended up staying home and going to LSU, that would have made a ton of sense to carry on that legacy. Texas is its own animal, and it's a tough one to root for. So it's sort of a weird dance, I think, for most fans of the SEC to think about Arch Manning being this big SEC presence and not just being a Texas-specific star player.
Chad Withrow from Hot Mike with Hutton and Withrow on Outkick has been our guest on D. Mace, Vingan, and Donick. Chad, have a great Labor Day weekend and enjoy all of the college football action.
Hey, same to you guys. Enjoy the long weekend. Thanks for having me.
Chad Withrow on the program. 615-737-1025. Our phone and text lines are driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Coming up next, we have covered Cam Ward from every angle over the past few months, and we will continue to do so. But there is another top draft pick in the city who will be a topic of discussion soon enough, and we will discuss him coming up next. 615-737-1025. I promised a giveaway, so here it is. Be caller number 4, and you can win a pair of tickets to see Coheed and Cambria and Taking Back Sunday at the Ascend Amphitheater on Wednesday, September 3rd. 615-737-1025. Caller number 4 will win a pair of tickets to see Coheed and Cambria with Taking Back Sunday at Ascend on Wednesday, September 3rd. That's this coming Wednesday. Willie Donick, Adam Vingan, 1025 The Game.
Hey, it's Derek Mason, and if you're thinking about your home curb appeal, don't overlook your garage. It's the biggest opening in your house. That is why I always recommend all Four Season Garage Doors, owned by Dan Watkins. This locally run, family-owned business you can trust. They've got huge selection on garage doors, so if you're ready for a new look, this is the place to go for quality. And if you need it fixed, whether it's a spring replacement, opener replacement, section replacement, or any repair, they'll get it done right. They can even quiet that noisy garage door or opener that's been driving you crazy. Installation, nobody does it better. They're big enough to serve, but small enough to care. That is why so many Middle Tennesseans trust them with their homes. Check them out online at all4seasongarages.com. That's all four, the number 4, seasonsgarages.com. When trust matters, call all Four Season Garage Doors.
This isn't just a concert, it's a cause. Trinetics' Rock the Cradle helps give fragile newborns a stronger start and keeps moms close when it matters most. With Tim McGraw live on stage and your support behind every beat, Ascension St. Thomas is turning music into healing. Tickets are on sale now at rockthecradlenashville.org. Willie Donick and Adam Vingan here with you as we take you into your Labor Day weekend. Derek Mason out today. He will be back on Tuesday. Of course, we will all be off on Monday. But as I said before the break, we have covered Cam Ward from every possible angle. Going back to what, Willie? January, February, maybe March or April. we knew months ahead of the NFL draft that Cam Ward was going to be the Titan selection at number 1 overall. So we have covered Cam Ward from every angle. And next week, when we get back on Tuesday at 3 p.m., it's a game week, Titans versus Broncos. We are going to be digging into that matchup again from every angle. And our focus has been and will continue to be on the NFL and college football as August turns to September. But the Nashville Predators will reconvene for training camp in just a couple of weeks. Their first preseason game is in less than a month. And perhaps the biggest story of Predators training camp will be the fate of the other top draft pick in our market, Brady Martin, the number 5 overall pick in the NHL draft. So Willie and I thought this would be a good time with the two of us here to start digging into this story a little bit, because we are going to be talking about it more once training camp starts. But the central question, Willie, and there are going to be others for the Predators when they take the ice again in a couple of weeks, but perhaps the central question of training camp: how should the Predators proceed with Brady Martin? As we sit here today, how would you answer that question?
I think it's a great question, because as we've said since the draft, when they selected him, I think it raised some eyebrows, only because of our lack of education here. We don't evaluate any of the players that are going to be picked. All we do is read what a lot of the evaluators, the best evaluators we know, we read their assessment of the prospects. And the consensus was that a guy like James Higgins, who had the added intrigue of being American, being for Team USA in the World Juniors, they won the gold medal. He played at a high-profile college league, and he at one point was the number 1 prospect. He was the consensus number 1. So all of that added some intrigue to James Higgins, and so that was our extent of the knowledge of James Higgins. You put that on one side of the ledger, and then you compare him to Brady Martin. What did Nashvillians know about him? Next to nothing, right? Nobody's ever watched him play. Nobody was reading about Brady Martin at all leading up to the draft. He was just another name on the list that you're like, well, they're probably not going to take him. And I'm putting myself in this category, right? I didn't know a whole lot about him. And lo and behold, they take him with the 5th pick. So in the backdrop of that, no matter who they picked, there's a lot riding on the 5th pick. You want to hit on that 5th pick, especially when you rarely pick that high. And now you've got a guy that maybe people were a little bit surprised when you took him at that spot. Not that he was on the board as a mid to late round first round pick. Most people had him at 7 or 8 on the list. Fair to say?
Yes.
Just maybe a couple slots before a lot of people had him. So with that in mind, here he comes. The other thing that I'm a little surprised at, but not really, because of the rules, he's not going to play college hockey. So the choices are he starts the year in Nashville, or he has to go back to junior. And the in-between is he could play, what is the number, Adam, 9 games?
9.
Before he is burning a year of his rookie contract.
Correct.
So what a lot of teams have done is they keep him around. They keep a player like that around for as long as they can. They probably rest him, don't play him every night, but they kind of see, is he close to being ready? And if he's not, then at least let's keep him around. He'll get a feel for what it takes to win in the NHL, the speed of the game, the tenacity of it, the difference firsthand of making a jump from playing against 18 to 20-year-olds as opposed to the best players in the world. It's a huge jump. And I don't care how good you are, unless you are an absolute freak like Connor McDavid or some of these other cream of the crop. There's maybe 1 or 2 every year. And even of those 1 or 2, a lot of those guys struggle when they're 18. Fair to say?
Yes.
And for the 5th pick, we did the research, right? How rare it is for the 5th pick in the draft, in any draft, to come up and be a regular from day 1. So I think the chances of him being ready to do that going in historically are pretty low. Is that fair to say?
Yes, but here is the interesting part of all of this. And Willie, you tell me if I am being hyperbolic here. I would challenge any hockey fan to find me center depth as bad as the Predators' projected center depth this season. If it's not
No
the
question.
if it's not the worst, it's certainly among the worst. Ryan O'Reilly, Fedor Svechkov, Eric Halla, Michael McCarron. That would be my 1 through 4 right now. If
It's the only 4. Am I wrong?
That is true. Even Barry Trotz himself acknowledged that after free agency.
And nobody goes into a year with 4 centers because guys get hurt. It's like that would be like going into a football season with 1 quarterback.
Right.
So
So
you have to have depth.
So on a deeper team, I don't think there would be a question. Perhaps Brady Martin sticks around to that 9-game limit, goes back to junior hockey. His entry-level contract slides to the following year. But I am curious if the Predators would considering the lack of center depth they have, of keeping Brady Martin around for the entire season. My gut tells me that is not a good idea. We will get more into the season outlook once the season gets closer, but I would not be offended if the Nashville Predators were just as bad as they were last year, because I think the Predators need another top pick to pair with Brady Martin so that those two players can hopefully be the faces of the franchise once Roman Josi and Philip Forsberg and others move on. But I wonder if there is any temptation, Willie, for the Predators to keep Brady Martin around longer than they may want to because of the lack of center depth on this team.
I would also take it a step further and look at Eric Halla, who right now by default is one of the 4 centers because that's his natural position. But really, Eric Halla has been at his best when he's been more of a utility man, right? I guess I'm also taking Barry Trotz at his word as saying that he does not want Steven Stamkos playing center. Like we know Steven Stamkos can play center. So the way I think they're going to go about it is probably feel okay about starting the year with the players that we've talked about. And I would include Brady Martin. At the way they've got it constructed, unless they just think he's just flat out not ready, let's send him back. I think they will see a benefit in just keeping him around, even if he's the 21st or 22nd player. But he may have to play a little bit if somebody gets hurt. But I think ideally, Steven Stamkos would not play center, and Eric Halla would be more of a support guy next to a young player like Fedor Svechkov. So I'm intrigued. I think that the space is there for them to make another move. Like Jack Roslovic is still out there. He's the one serviceable center that's still sitting there on the market, maybe like Shai Tuttle was for the Titans, right? So is there another move up their sleeve that they are looking to make that they feel like at some point, whether it's before training camp or even after the season starts, they can make? But in the meantime, it'll give them a chance to take a look at Brady Martin. But the thing about it is they really can't afford to get off to a bad start, or else it's going to be very, very tough to get through it because they probably lost a little bit of the swagger. I don't say probably. It's going to be tough to overcome the fact that they lost the swagger last year. The confidence has to be starting with some question marks. And if you get another bad start, everybody's going to be saying, well, what about Andrew Burnett? And what's going on? And here we go again with the bad start. There's a lot of pressure going on. And so it's going to be difficult to do that and also be trying to bring along Brady Martin in that environment. So there's some challenges that I see there. It's going to be a really intriguing training camp and beginning of the season, the way it's constructed here.
615-737-1025. Our phone and text lines are driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Our plan is to sprinkle in some of these Predators topics over the course of September and, of course, get into it full go in October when the Predators open the regular season. But training camp, I mean, Monday is September. Training camp is what? 2.5, 3 weeks away.
Yep. The rookies report, including Brady Martin, on September 10th. So you'll start to hear the Brady Martin name quite a bit from that day forward with people that really cover the team closely. So yeah, there's going to be some drama for sure, and that's a lot. Very few Predators in their history have been ready to go day one when they're 18. Seth Jones,
Scott Hartnell.
They did it with Scott Hartnell, but David Poyle was on the record as saying he regretted doing that with Scott Hartnell. And there'll be some, because I've already talked to some of them, that will be riding the wave of just let the kid go, let him play, give him the experience, and that's a dangerous thing to do. And nobody knows that more than Barry Trotz, so he's not going to put that kid in a position that he can't handle. But at the same time, maybe Brady Martin is special enough that they take a look at it. We'll just have to wait and see.
615-737-1025. Coming up next, Willie has his 5th of 10 pressing Titans questions. We'll recap.
Yes, I do.
Well, he indeed does. We will recap the first 4. Willie will introduce the 5th. We will do that next. 615-737-1025. Willie Donick, Adam Vingan, 1025 The Game. D. Mace, Fingan, and Donick 1025, The Game, broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. Willie Donick, Adam Vingan, and David Janes here with you as we start our Labor Day weekend. The Tennessee Titans, 1 week from Sunday, will kick off in Denver against the Broncos. Hey, look at this. The line has moved. Denver is no longer 8-point favorites. They're 7.5-point favorites. Congratulations, Titans. You are still a touchdown underdog, but at least it isn't 8 points, right?
I guess.
It appears that is still the biggest line of the week. Actually, and this is not a shocker after what happened yesterday, the Eagles are 7.5-point favorites against the Cowboys on Thursday Night Football to kick off the season. So the Cowboys and the Titans are the biggest underdogs of the week at 7.5 points. So
what do you call, Adam, the thing that a lot of people do every year where you pick the sure winner and you have to survive the survival
survivor pool, yeah.
So is it a codlock cinch that the Titans will be the most popular pick in the survivor pool for week 1, the consensus?
Yeah, I would say so. I think there will be a lot of votes for the Cowboys after Micah Parsons got traded. And they open on the road at Philadelphia. So I do think the Cowboys will be a popular selection in survivor pools as well. But yes, I would agree. I think the Broncos are going to be a popular selection.
And yet, in the NFL, there's probably conservatively one every other week, but I would say 13 of the 17 weeks, a game that has you in week 1 is no different. In fact, it probably is more likely in week 1. A game that has you going, huh?
Right.
How did that happen?
Wasn't it Patriots over Bengals in week 1
Yes.
last season? Yeah,
yes.
that's the
great
perfect
example.
That's the perfect example. One texter has already made his prediction for the game. My prediction for that game is that Bo Nix throws for 2 touchdowns early in the first, and then they run the ball the rest of the game, and R.J. Harvey and J.K. Dobbins total for 300 yards and 2 touchdowns. I think Calvin Ridley gets in the end zone, and the Titans don't score more than 7 points.
Okay, keep that text filed away, and then we'll read it next Monday, a week from Monday, and see if it lines up.
We shall see. But over the course of the week, and we will continue this next week as well, we will have to do 2 Titans questions, or perhaps we'll do 2 today if we come up with it. But each day this week, Willie has been presenting what he feels are pressing Titans questions as we look ahead to the start of the regular season. So, Willie, before we introduce question number 5, let's quickly recap questions 1 through 4 and our responses for each of them.
All right. Question 1. Over or under 42.5 sacks allowed for the Titans offensive line. You know that has been a source of big conversation the last couple of years, and they have not done a good job protecting their quarterbacks. 42.5 would constitute about league average, a little worse than league average. We're getting a little margin here. All of us did not think they could go under 42.5. That would be an excellent number because it would mark double-digit improvement over last year and way more improvement from 2 years ago. Yet we all think it'll be better, but still over that 42.5. Question 2, Cam Ward, over or under 12.5 games played? I said under. D. Mason, Adam said over. Adam said he's going to play all 17.
I did.
I go by the track record the last few years. The Titans have had trouble keeping their quarterback healthy, and so I just went the other way. I went under. Question 3, Calvin Ridley, very spicy debate. Over or under 1,100 yards in his second season as a Titan. He had 1,017 last year, 1,017. All of us say over, although it's interesting. We think he's going to get a lot of targets. And he has had a lot of targets in his career, but he's only had 1 year where he has eclipsed 1,100. Or he had the one big year he had 1,300. But he's a guy that doesn't catch a high percentage of his targets. Yet we're confident he's going to get 1,100 or more. 4, more combined yards. Group A, Jim DK, Alec Iomanner, Gunnar Helm, Bryce Oliver. Or Group B, the incumbents, Tyler Lockett, Van Jefferson, Chig Okonkwo. So in other words, the question is, are the young upstart skill players going to have more production than the placeholders that are in front of them right now? D-Mace and Adam took the incumbents, the veterans, Lockett, Jefferson, and Chig. I took the youngsters, DK, Iomanner, Helm, and Oliver. But I think it's a key question on which direction the season goes for the Titans, both this year and going forward. And now we get to today. Availability is a skill. And to be effective in this league, you got to be out there. 2 guys that fit this mold for the Titans that, if they're out there, could help some. L'Jarius Sneed and Tajay Spears. We know the tale of LJ, as Mike Borgonzi likes to call him. L'Jarius Sneed. It's been quite the interesting tenure since he became a Titan. Played only 5 games last year. Wasn't himself even when he was playing. Then had the mysterious injury that nobody saw and missed the rest of the season. Then the offseason goes on. And of course, there were the issues there. With the off-field incident, the grand jury hearing will be in mid to late September if it stays on time. Who knows what will happen with that? And then, of course, the league always has that wild card of, do they deem there was conduct unbecoming of a player? So there could be some supplementary discipline thrown out there at some point. But that being said, Sneed is off the PUP. He's practicing. And there seems to be a lot of optimism that he'll be in uniform for game 1 if he's not suspended. Then there's Tajay Spears, who played 12 games last year. So he was dealing with some different injuries. He still has yet to really back up any of the flash that he's shown with consistent production alongside of the veteran Tony Pollard. In a perfect world, Spears and Pollard would be the 1-2 punch to try to support Cam Ward. And Spears, we know now, has the high ankle sprain that has got him on IR. So the maximum he could play this year would be 13 games if he's ready to go when he's eligible to come off the IL, which is not a given. So all that said, the availability of these 2 players is in question. They played a combined 17 games last year. So we set the over-under this year at 17.5. Okay, Adam. Over or under? Sneed and Spears combined. 17.5 games played.
I had a harder time answering this question than I thought I would because my gut was under. Because who the hell knows with L'Jarius Sneed? He appears he's going to be ready for week 1, but that word appears is doing a lot of heavy lifting considering what we saw last season from L'Jarius Sneed. So my gut, when you first presented this question to me, was under. Not even a thought in my mind. But I think I'm going to go slightly over. Here's the caveat. I think Tajay Spears is going to be available once he misses his required 4 games. I'm not sure how effective he's going to be once he comes back because, Willie, as you know and we have discussed, high ankle sprains, they tend to linger. This is not a run-of-the-mill ankle sprain. High ankle sprains, when you suffer one of those, even if you're back on the playing field, you can still feel it, right? So Tajay Spears could play 13 games. I don't know how effective he's going to be in those 13 games, but he could be on the field for those 13 games. So after thinking it through, I am going to take the over. I think it's going to be a slight over. I anticipate both of them will play enough to overtake the 17.5. What this answer does not take into account is how good will they be when they're on the field? Because that's not what you're asking. That's not what you're asking.
But I have today a little nuance to our question.
Okay, let me hear it.
We have part B.
Oh,
We have so I'm like that professor that
this is
hits you
new to
with
me.
a two-part question. And that is part B is if you had to buy stock in one or the other.
Oh man.
And I, albeit, will say that both stocks are pretty low right now. Who would you buy stock in for production this year? And I realize it's hard. It's a little subjective comparing a corner to a running back, right? We can look at the stats for the running back and say he's got this many yards, etc. But who would you rather back with some stock, Snead or Spears? Because that's the second part of the question. Who's going to have a better year?
Oh man. That is a tough question because you're right. It's apples and oranges, right? Comparing the productivity of a defensive back.
And let me tell the
versus a
listeners,
running
because
back.
I want the listeners in on this. 615-737-1025. I want you to answer this question over or under 17 and a half games combined, but also who would you buy stock in for a better season this year? And you cannot cop out with I wouldn't buy stock in either one of those guys. I need you to pick one because I know there were a lot of people that would. And look, if you want to give us sarcastic, fun answer as to why you wouldn't buy stock, have at it on the text line. We want fun on this show, right? But I am really curious, right? Can they get anything out of either one of these guys? Right? This is a huge question for this roster. They desperately need something to go right. For the last couple of years, nothing has gone right for the franchise in general, but especially with Snead, who they backed up the Brinks truck a boatload of money to, and he hasn't given them return on the investment at all, and it looks pretty tenuous. But he is ready to go. Like we were very skeptical 4 weeks ago that he would be ready for week one. Now it looks like there's a chance, a pretty good chance, that he suits up in the first game.
That is a tough question to answer. A lot more is riding on L'Jarius Snead than Tajay Spears. Because if Tajay Spears isn't ready, you still have Tony Pollard, assuming Tony Pollard stays healthy, and Julius Chestnut, and maybe they find another running back off of the scrap heap somewhere. But if Snead is unavailable, we know the status, the quality of the other cornerbacks for the Tennessee Titans. So a lot more is riding on Snead than Spears. If I had to buy stock in one of them, it is tough. My gut leans towards Tajay Spears because at least we saw some production from Spears last season. And even a hobbled Spears, assuming he comes back from the high ankle sprain and there are some lasting effects, I still think you can squeeze something out of him. I was just so, what's the word I'm looking for here? I can't think of another one, so I'll just say it. Disappointed by what happened with L'Jarius Snead last season. I'm just unconvinced that we will ever see the Super Bowl winning L'Jarius Snead in Tennessee. So I'm not really optimistic about either of them, but I will lean Spears.
Okay. The reason I throw Spears in there as an important guy, he's another symbol of another draft that it's teetering on being a complete bust. And Spears, in my mind, he has shown glimpses and flashes of, okay, this guy can make some plays, but it hasn't translated to stats that you can really lean on, right? You can circle plays or show a tape of a play or two where you're like, wow. And it's not a play or two. It's they sprinkle in there. You're like, wow, he's got something here. He can make guys miss, and he's pretty strong for his size. He can move the pile sometimes. He can get him out in space and things can happen, but it just hasn't translated. And then of course on top of that, staying healthy stuff. And then the high ankle sprain, his style of play, you would think the high ankle sprain would affect him more than a lot of other players because he needs to be shifty. He needs to be able to make people miss. And so they need a hit their draft reputation. Of course, Borgonzi's sitting there going, I didn't make the move for either one of these guys. But others, you need players. This is a dearth of talent. You need somebody to step up. So how am I going to answer this question? I am going under the 17 and a half. I think there are guys who are just not quite cut out to be NFL players when it comes to their body. Like if you give them a magic wand and you could be healthy, and I'm talking about Spears, then I think he would be productive. It's not a lack of talent, but I just don't think his body will hold up. Although he did play 17 games his rookie year. That should not be overlooked. And then Snead, I'll just believe it when I see it. I can't fathom him playing more than about half the games. So with a maximum of 13 for Spears, and then you got to have about half of the games, or you got to have 5 or 6 games, give or take, from Snead. I just think there's a chance something goes horribly wrong with one of them, and so that would get you under. So I'm going to go under.
615-737-1025. Our phone and text lines are driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Willie, recap for the listeners. Question number 5, because it's 2 parts, so keep that in mind.
Part A, L'Jarius Snead and Tajay Spears. A lot of skepticism about their availability. We know Spears is out at least 4 games. Will they combine to play 17, over or under 17 and a half games? Over, under 17 and a half combined. And then if you have to pick one or the other to buy stock in, who will be more productive this year, Snead or Spears?
615-737-1025. We will get to your reaction. Coming up next, Willie Donick, Adam Vingan, 1025 The Game. D-Mace, Fingan, and Donick, 1025 The Game. Willie Donick, Adam Vingan here with you. The season debut of Take It to the Bank coming up in the final segment. It's for real now. The points count now. And that is coming up in about 20 minutes. But before we get there, Willie, let's recap question number 5 of your pressing Titans questions. We will get to your reaction, 615-737-1025.
Okay, I want to hear from you. 615-737-1025. Do you have faith? Or are you a big-time skeptic in the availability of 2 players on the Titans, L'Jarius Sneed and Tajay Spears? Will they combine to play basically over half the games? Over under 17 and a half games combined. Will they be out there? We know Spears is going to miss the first 4 games minimum. Sneed, if we had asked this question 3 weeks ago, everybody would have said under, hands down. But he's starting to practice. They're very optimistic that he will be out there at the beginning of the season. That's got to count for something. And then if you had to back a horse, Sneed or Spears, which player would you buy stock in first, Sneed or Spears, to have a better season?
Ricky answers the first question. He's taking the over, saying L'Jarius Sneed will play 15 games and Tajay Spears will play 7.
15 games.
15 games for Sneed, 7 for Spears.
Well, that would put you at the over, and that's getting the over even with only 7 games for Spears. So I'm curious why he thinks that Sneed will be able to play that many. I'm very skeptical of that. But you never know. This is why you ask these questions, because we revisit these every 4 weeks, and we know if they go a certain way, we can look really silly for even asking the question when we did. But we know this has been a big topic all summer long.
I know that there is a lot riding on the availability of L'Jarius Sneed because of the state of the Titans' cornerback depth. But don't discount the importance of Tajay Spears' availability as well. The Titans made a point in the offseason to talk about how they were hoping for a balanced rushing attack with Tony Pollard and Tajay Spears. Tony Pollard had some of the highest rushing yards after contact numbers in the NFL last season because he was being contacted behind the line of scrimmage so damn much. And I do think it took an effect over the course of the season. So it would be nice for the Titans to have a second back they could rely on. I also think that would be better for Tony Pollard because remember, Tony Pollard became a bona fide NFL player by being that change of pace back for Ezekiel Elliott in Dallas. And his best 2 yards per carry seasons of his career were during those couple of seasons in Dallas before he left and joined the Tennessee Titans. So I do actually think you get a better Tony Pollard if you limit the number of times he touches the ball. But with Tajay Spears out of the lineup for at least the first 4 weeks, I am curious, Willie, about how the distribution of carries is going to go. We assume it will be Julius Chestnut taking the backup role. So I think that Tajay Spears' absence could play a bigger role over the course of the season with Tony Pollard.
I completely agree. Tony Pollard, no doubt, is at his best when he doesn't have to be the workhorse. And Tajay Spears, and maybe they were wrong to count on him, but as we've said, they have too many holes to fill in one off season. In a perfect world, you might want an upgrade there, but he's got a great opportunity. That's why it was so disappointing about him having the setback he did in the first preseason game, because I do see a difference between Spears and Chestnut. Maybe Chestnut gives you a little bit more than you think he will at this point. He's completely unproven. But yeah, I think the tandem is everything. And Brian Callahan has not really seen that work, especially with what you would hope is a better offensive line.
Chris on our text line says, to use the words of Sweet Lou Piniella, do you think Sneed is jaking it? Is that the word? He's earned his payday, however. Now he is not earning his paycheck. Chris in the borough.
He's referring to Sneed?
Yes.
Well, if he, how would you answer that if he's in there in week 1?
I've never been of the mind that L'Jarius Sneed is just phoning it in now because he got paid. I know, I'm sure it happens in sports. It's an easy thing to say when a player gets paid and then struggles. Oh, he doesn't care anymore because he got paid. I mean, I think most of the time it's just something for upset fans to latch onto. But I don't necessarily believe that.
I don't either, because I don't see how you can even say that if he's in there in week 1. I think, I think people were suspicious of that for a while, and I thought that was unfair to assume that. I never don't give the player the benefit of the doubt unless there's something really strong, right? I think that narrative was floated by somebody. I shouldn't say just one person, but there were the ringleaders in that narrative, and I'll leave it at that. I never bought into that. And so if he's in there week 1, how would you answer that question? Because it's not for me to answer, because I never doubted that. I usually don't doubt a professional athlete will want to play until he cannot play anymore.
The one play that comes to mind for those who believe that athletes who get paid just stopped caring is that one play when Albert Haynesworth was in Washington when he fell on the ground and just laid there. I'm like, okay, that typifies maybe what you're talking about. But
there are exceptions, right?
yes.
But by and large, 99% of the best athletes in the world want to play until you have to drag them off the field.
Joey from Bellevue says, I think under. Both are unreliable. Spears is Burks 2.0. However, I would buy stock in Sneed. It's a toss-up, but I'll roll with Sneed. Viking Matt says he is going under 15 combined for both players.
Under 15, okay. I knew we would get some bites on the under because of the fatalism and right now the lack of confidence in the organization as a whole. And so until they experience some success, I think you're going to be more apt to have the glass half empty, especially on a question like this, where you just haven't seen these guys prove that they can stay out there.
We need to recalibrate our expectations for L'Jarius Sneed. I know he's making the same money that he was making last season, but the fact that he was unavailable for most of the season, excuse me, and he's dealing with the chronic knee injury. Let me ask you this question, Willie. What would you consider a successful season for L'Jarius Sneed? It can be games played, it can be statistics, it can be however you want to define it. If by the end of the season, if L'Jarius Sneed does X, Y, Z for you, what would constitute a successful season?
For me, if he plays and gives them league average cornerback play for 14 to 17 games, to me, that's a success because that's a pretty good rebound. And so, as you notice, I'm not expecting elite cornerback play from him. I think that's a little too much to ask. So I just hope he's on the field and can be steady, better than what they would have otherwise. And remember, they did go pick up some corners, right? They grabbed a couple off the waiver wire. They're kind of trying to float numbers at you and hope that they're okay. But if he could just give you somebody that, the other team is saying, well, they got Sneed over there. I'm not sure, and they're not picking on that person, right? As opposed to he's not there and whoever's out there like, yep, we can go work that guy. That would be a success as a bounce back. So that's not the highest bar, but it's a bar.
Steven says, though these two Band-Aid brand ambassadors will not give you more than a dozen games combined this season. A dozen.
I'm not surprised. Yeah, but you'd have to be concerned that if one of them all of a sudden is out, it just takes one play. With their history, that's what it seems like it's happened before. It's not implausible.
Viking Matt chimes back in to specify that Sneed will play 6 games. He said that he is going under 15 for the two combined. Snead will play 6. So I assume that means L'Jarius Sneed will play, Tajay Spears will play no more than 8.
Okay. Remember, Spears has a maximum of 13.
Yes. Here's what my prediction is. I think Tajay Spears comes back as soon as he can. So he is unavailable until at least week 5. He has to miss the first 4 games of the season. I say Spears comes back in week 5 and plays most of the rest of the season, maybe misses a game here or there. So out of a maximum of 13, I'm thinking he'll play 10. I think that's my number for Spears is 10. He'll miss the first 4 games. He'll miss 3 others over the course of the season. He'll suit up for 10. Now, who knows how productive he'll be in those 10 games, but I will say that Spears dresses for 10 of 17 games.
Okay. I think that's reasonable. Would you take that? I'd be, you still would be thrilled.
The litany of injuries that he suffered last season. There was a couple of concussions, right? And a regular ankle sprain. And I think there was a hamstring injury as well. It's like the board game operation out there. I would take 10. I would take double digits.
Okay.
If he can get to 10, I will take it. So he misses the first 4 and then misses 3 others scattered around the rest of the season.
Okay, do you factor anything in? We want to hear more responses. 615-737-1025. If I throw this in there, because this is a fact, Tajay Spears did play all 17 games 2 years ago. L'Jarius Sneed, in the 3 years leading up to last year, played 15, 17, and 16. So it's not like this is a chronic thing, right? But what we know is he had a strange injury last year, which is kind of like, well, what's the track record of recovery for that? We don't really have one. And he had knee issues coming in that we were hearing about, that they were managing. He didn't practice. We know all of that. But the guy was out there, right? And he did have a procedure on a knee that was the reason he was on the PUP. So with all of that, let's not forget that he did go 15, 17, 16 for 3 straight years. Does that change your thought at all?
That's a good question. I gave L'Jarius Sneed the benefit of the doubt last season when all of this stuff was happening because he was available for basically every game with the Kansas City Chiefs. So I feel like it would be hypocritical of me not to give him the benefit of the doubt again, but just the mysterious nature of that injury last season and how vague the Titans were and how vague Sneed was. I don't think there was anything conspiratorial going on, but there were enough question marks to make me skeptical. So although I understand and I defended Sneed last season by pointing out the fact that he was available almost every game in Kansas City, I just think the weird nature of everything last season has left me feeling skeptical about the whole thing.
Right. And so on top of the 15, 17, and 16 games he played in his last 3 years in Kansas City, he also played 10 additional playoff games. So he had shown he could go through the rigors and be available at a really high level. I think the thing that is in the back of my mind, besides the recency, right, and besides that notion right now of anything that can go wrong for the Titans is likely to go wrong because it's been going wrong. You have to fight through that to try to be positive about it. Is just a player's knee, right? If there are issues medically with players' knees, they don't tend to get better as the player gets older. They're more likely to crop up again. And so with Spears and with Sneed, that's the specific thing I think that creates the most skepticism in my mind, which is why I have gone under. It's not because I think they're not trying, right? That's zero of my thinking. It's just that sometimes medically, your body just can't take the rigors and you can't be the player that you want to be.
615-737-1025. We will continue to take your thoughts on this. But coming up next, the season debut of Take It to the Bank. We'll make our selections. We'll also welcome in Connor Newt to give us a preview of the high school football action around the mid-state tonight. That's coming up next. Willie Donick, Adam Vingan, 102.5 The Game. D-Mace, Vingen, and Donick, 102.5 The Game. Willie Donick, Adam Vingen. Almost said Derek Mason. Derek's not here today. David Janes as well. It is time to take it to the bank with our friends at F&M Bank. Less worry, more living. F&M Bank, banking made easy on purpose. So, if this is your first time hearing Take It to the Bank, now it gets real again. For the past several months, we've been just having fun with it, but now the points count. So David Janes is in charge of the point system. It's completely subjective. So David Janes determines how many points you get for each pick based on the degree of difficulty. Again, completely subjective. It's up to David. We've closed all of the loopholes that Derek Mason tried to wiggle through last season, where he would make like 3 picks within each pick. That's not happening anymore. We each get 4 selections. I think starting next week, what we're going to do is we're going to take a page out of the Pigskin Pick'em book from Robbie and Rexroad and make 2 picks, 2 common picks, and then 2 individual picks. But for this week, we're doing all individual picks. Willie, we'll start with you. Derek did get his picks into David Janes, even though he's not here today. So David will share his own picks as well as Derek's. But Willie, why don't you go first?
All right, I'm going to take Ohio State -1.5 against Texas. I'll take the Buckeyes. I will take Tennessee to cover in their game against Syracuse. I've got -13.5 for Tennessee. I think they'll get off to a good start. I'm buying into what Mitch laid out for Syracuse. Just too many question marks, too many different players. We know it could go either way, but I feel like Tennessee will be up to the task. I'm going also. I'm not going to shy away from the big games, so I'm going to take LSU to win. But I won't flat out go for too much because I'm skeptical of David's degree of difficulty system. So I'm just going to play it straight, give myself every opportunity to win, and I'm going to go LSU plus the 4.5 against Clemson. And then finally, a little personal note: a local tie, friend of the Donick family, London Humphreys out of CPA, wide receiver for Georgia, touchdown against the Thundering Herd of Marshall for number 5 Georgia on Saturday.
Okay, here are my 4 selections. I, too, will take LSU to upset Clemson on the road. Clemson is favored by 4.5. I will say LSU will win by a field goal. So LSU will upset Clemson by a field goal on the road.
So what do you get if they win by a field goal? Are you looking for extra bonus points or see, these are the gray rules of this context.
That's all up to David James.
That I always complain about. You have to try to read the mind of the commissioner, which I cannot do. I did not do successfully last year.
That's your fault. All right, that's all I say. That's your fault. You could have slipped me a few dollar bills. I am a.
It is taken to the bank after all.
I am a fair judge, but I can be bought.
Okay, so my first selection is that LSU will upset Clemson. The Tigers, the LSU Tigers, that is. They will win by a field goal. My second selection, Alabama, 13.5-point favorites on the road at Florida State, will cover against the Seminoles. So I have Alabama just kicking the crap out of Florida State in Tallahassee. Vanderbilt and Charleston Southern tomorrow. Diego Pavia will record at least 3 combined touchdowns versus Charleston Southern. So any combination, 3 passing, 0 rushing, 2 passing, 1 rushing, etc. Diego Pavia will record at least 3 combined touchdowns versus Charleston Southern. And my final selection, by the time we are back next Friday, there will have been an NFL game, a regular season game, Cowboys at Eagles next Thursday to open the season. After what happened yesterday, Philadelphia, which is favored by 7.5, will win by double digits against the Cowboys. Those are my 4 picks. David, why don't you do...
So are you locked into that number? Because it could change. That line could change between now and next Thursday.
Yes, I am locked into that number. So Philadelphia is 7.5-point favorites at home against the Cowboys. I say the Eagles will win by at least 10 points. So, David
I like
James,
those.
why don't you read yours and then you can read Derek's?
All right, so I went to the Alabama versus Florida State game, and I agree. I think it's going to be. Yeah, actually, no, I don't agree. I think Florida State is going to pull off the upset of the weekend. I'm going big or go home. That's what taking to the bank has to be. You got to go big or go home.
I hear you.
So I think Florida State's going to win against Alabama. I like, what was it? I was trying to find out. This is how unprepared I am. Lenore Sellers. I think Lenore Sellers, he is one of my Heisman favorites. I think he's just really, really good. I'm going to go with 2 touchdowns against Virginia Tech. And it'll be 2 rushing touchdowns by Lenore Sellers against Virginia Tech. I'm also going to pick the U against Miami. Go Canes. I was trying to remember their name.
Playing Notre Dame.
Playing Notre Dame. Yep. Go Canes. And I will also, you know what? Screw it. I was not wanting to do this, but I am. Nick Vattiato. He's going for 3 touchdowns this weekend. Go Blue Raiders, baby.
Okay. All right.
David, the commissioner, with the go big or go home attitude.
Exactly.
Let the record show you did go home last year.
I did. Listen, also, I want to make the record know that I came in a couple weeks into the season as well, or a month later in the season. So I was already down for the record book.
Well, what happened last season is I started off incredibly well because I kept betting every week that Will Levis was going to have a turnover, and that worked like a charm. And then over time, I stopped winning as much, and Derek was able to catch me.
That was fair. Yeah.
So
Derek's is, and Derek has pretty good picks here. He said Nico will throw a touchdown and rush 4-1. So Nico for the UCLA Bruins will throw for a touchdown and rush for
that could help
touchdown.
me in silly underdog picks since I took UCLA to upset Utah.
Yeah,
on the weekend.
Yeah, but it could help you out a lot. And so he also said Manning will throw, this is crazy, for over 225 and a passing touchdown.
Okay.
So he is big on the Manning train.
Texas
the Manning
versus Ohio State.
He also said Nick Marsh will have over 100 yards receiving, and that Diego Pavia will throw for 2 touchdowns.
Well, see, now here's where the degree of difficulty comes in, Willie. Derek is predicting two passing touchdowns for Diego Pavia. I am predicting 3 touchdowns of any kind for Diego Pavia. So that's where the degree of difficulty comes in. So let's say Diego Pavia has 1 passing touchdown and 2 rushing touchdowns. Is that more of a degree of difficulty for me, or is it for Derek? If he goes for 2.
I cannot read the mind of the commissioner. I did not read the mind of the commissioner very well last year, and that's what I am using as my excuse as to why I finished 3rd last year.
The mind of the commissioner is that like meme of the monkey with the bells, just doing this. That's my mind right now.
Yes. All right. Well, just in a matter of moments, Connor Newt and Parker Kelly will bring you Game Blitz. Connor Newt joins us in studio now.
Hi there.
Hello, Connor. Give us a rundown of what to expect tonight in high school football across the Mid-State.
Well, there's a lot of big games tonight. Father Ryan is playing Riverdale, which will be a big one. 2 teams coming off of a win.
Love that show.
Yeah, Riverdale. Yeah, with Archie. Page and Green Hill. Number 6 Page versus number 14 Green Hill. Big game in the Mid-State tonight. Got some other ones as well. My JP2 Knights are off in East Robertson. Of course, Pearl Cone and CPA are doing battle tonight. 2 teams that came away with losses last week, and they are going to do battle to get in the win column. CPA, I think, one of the best, if not the best teams in the entire Mid-State. So that's certainly one to keep an eye on. Lots of other games. There is over 91 games across the Mid-State tonight.
That's a lot.
We will have every single score, every single final on these airwaves starting as soon as our public schools game of the week is over.
Now, Connor, Willie has an important question for you about high school football. Willie, I know you asked me this earlier. I have no idea what the answer is. The expert is here, Connor Newt. So why don't you ask him?
Well, Connor, I just want maybe for people that are, looking from a macro, right? Everybody's following their team.
Yeah.
But if you had to guess right now, if you had to pronounce Connor Newt's 3 best teams in the Mid-State, regardless of classification, how would you rank them right now?
Oh, Willie, why are you doing this to me? Well, I
I
think
want conversation. I want to create talk.
well, Willie, I think number one has to be Oakland. Oakland is the defending state champions in their region. I think they are top tier in terms of talent. They have a dynamic quarterback, and they bring in some transfer talent from Joel Wyatt, who is a two-way player. He played in Bell Buckle last year, which unfortunately no longer has a football program, but glad to see him over down I-24 playing in Rutherford County. These are in no particular order, by the way. I think I just mentioned CPA would probably be on that list too. If you look at CPA's schedule, their win-loss record, I don't think will be indicative of how good of a team they are. They play an absolutely brutal schedule. They played Oakland last week. Obviously, they're up against Pearl Cone this week. They play a ton of other teams. I'd have to have the schedule in front of me to tell you those teams, but they play a loaded schedule. And I think, Willie, you can go and tell George Plaster I said this. I think BGA would have to be my third team. They have a lot of great talent. Caden Marable is their quarterback. He's 6'2", 170, which is a good frame for a quarterback, but he's one of the top quarterbacks in the state, not just the mid-state, the state. They have some great talent at the wide receiver position, and they're a young team. They're all sophomores and juniors, so they're not going anywhere anytime soon. So you can tell George I said I support his BGA team, and I think they are going to make some noise this season.
I'm sure the director will appreciate that very, very much.
That's the goal. I'm trying to get in the good graces of George Plaster.
That's not a bad move.
Well, Connor, we look forward to all of the coverage of high school football starting right after our program ends in just a matter of seconds. We hope you had a wonderful week. We sure did. We hope you have a wonderful Labor Day weekend. Enjoy all of the college football because, boy, there are some excellent games this weekend. We will break it all down. We will also look ahead. It is game week when we return to these airwaves Tuesday at 3 p.m. Titans at Broncos. We will start breaking down that matchup because we are just a week or so away from actual football being played, NFL football, that is. So looking forward to that on behalf of Willie and Derek, who always says this to end every show. Be loved, love on your people. Have a wonderful and safe Labor Day weekend. We will talk to you Tuesday, 3 p.m. Peace.